And we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is fantasy author Aaron Hodges, and we are here to talk about his book, Untamed Isles, The Path Awakens. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Hey, as you said, I'm Aaron Hodges. I'm coming to you down under in New Zealand. We're currently on 10 a.m. on a Monday here, so it's a little bit in the future. And yeah, today we're talking about my new book, The Untamed Isles, The Path Awakens, which has just gone live on Amazon a couple of weeks ago now, I think.
Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about the book. What's it about, and what can we expect?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a different adventure for me. It's a fantasy as per my usual, but it's more of an adventure fantasy than epic fantasy. A group of characters set off on a bit of a journey to explore this strange new island that's appeared off in the ocean, and each of them has their own specific wants and needs of what brings them to the island. There's Zachary Sicario, who is dying of an illness and has decided to go rejoin the underworld in the hopes he might be able to find some impossible cure. There's the other main character is Logan, who his family is basically a family of soldiers and heroes, and had his father and his brother are both kind of legends around the kingdom, and so but he's still a bit of a nobody and hasn't done anything with his life yet. So he's sort of sets off as this chance to prove himself and prove to everyone that he can live up to his family legacy. And then there's a bunch of other interesting characters with various good or nefarious reasons for journeying to this mysterious island filled with fantastic beasts and magic.
Okay, so it sounds a bit like a quest fantasy, and it's got sounds like it's got some mythology mixed in it, or maybe some traditional fantasy creatures. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's drew on a couple of things. I wanted to draw on more of a 18th century London, so there's a little bit of steam powered motor automobile sort of stuff going around in the background, but for the most part, once they reach the island, it delves more into your traditional fantasy as no form of technology works on the island. And the island itself is filled with these monsters that are actually drawn off a video game that my friends are creating called the Untamed Isles. And it's more of like a beast taming video game. And so the characters arrive a year before any of the events happen in the game. And so I was given freedom to basically explore this world and figure out what we wanted it to be, and how we wanted it to function. And it's about these first people to arrive on these very strange islands with various creatures that some are more traditional, drawing on inspirations from dragons and so forth, and others are little different, more modern versions of different animals and so on and so forth, and each have their own sort of powers that they can gift or use against you or
Oh,
our
so it has
characters.
a it's a little bit of game lit and a little bit of steampunk. Sounds like mixed in there a little too. So that sounds cool.
Yeah, I wanted to explore some different themes, so as I've done very traditional epic fantasy in the past and sword and sorcery, so I wanted to expand a little bit into some newer genres and newer crossovers.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the main character. What's he like?
Yeah, so Zachary is a very shadowy character. He's been a thief and a bit of an assassin in the past. He's lived in the underworld without much of a conscience, but he did retire for a time after meeting the girl of his dreams and so on. And so he's sort of just been drawn back into this world that he thought he had left behind, but in reality, he had only paused his time there. And so he's sort of caught on this precipice between diving all the way back into his dark past or walking the line where in the light, and he sort of struggles with that throughout the book, and whether he wants to be a good guy like his wife would have wanted him to, or delve back into his dark past, which would give him the best chance of success on the island. And then Logan kind of just wants to be a hero and sees the world through the eyes of someone that thinks the world is filled with heroes and is a little bit naive when it comes to some of the other characters on the island. But it's quite a fun adventure of him discovering for himself what the world is like and how he wants what sort of person he wants to be in the world.
It sounds like you're playing the two characters off each other a little bit. Am I right?
Yeah, that was what I found worked the best. It was I went through quite an exploration on the two characters in the end, and the contrast between the two ended up being quite fun to work with.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the world itself. What kind of creatures are we going to find in it?
Yeah, so there's a good range of them that the Untamed Isles guys have created. So I was mostly drawing on their creations for the monsters themselves. There are, although I took on a darker path because the game will be quite a lot lighter as it's a year after the people have arrived. So when they first arrived, the island is very unforgiving, and these monsters, some there, as I said, there's a dragon, one that's more like a dragon. There's one that's kind of described as more like a lion, but has its song puts people to sleep, and and there's the more like fox one that's more illusion based. There's there's a good range. There's another one that gets more powerful the more angry that you make it, which the characters discover a little too late. Which I had a lot of fun with because it actually end up that's called the Guppy, and it actually end up being kind of the Moscow. That word is escaping me for some reason. The favorite at the tame of the game and that they're developing. So it's sort of the picture for all the employees on the on the Zoom and stuff, and yeah, it ended up being quite fun to write about it in the books.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene that you wrote in the book?
I'd say the hardest parts were around the middle, where had a bunch of actions that I wanted to happen throughout the middle of the book, and it was quite difficult finding the order in which they were meant to go, in which they fit together, as there was quite a few ups and downs, and I wanted to be able to write some pretty serious scenes that take place between a bunch of characters, but also be able to have the lighter scenes of sort of giving the reader and the characters a space to breathe in the middle without it seeming like it wouldn't make sense for them to do that. So it was quite difficult to fit those scenes in together, and especially between battling with the various monsters and each other.
Sort of like putting a puzzle together, eh?
Yeah, it's like every book, but it does sometimes the middle works very easily, and sometimes it really wants to fight you.
Okay, so what was your favorite scene or type of scene that you wrote?
My favorite scene was probably the ending scene where both Zach and Logan have to make some very hard choices based on their past and each other and what they want for the future.
Okay,
Can't
so
say too much more about it
yeah,
without any spoilers.
yeah, we don't want spoilers. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about some of the secondary characters. Do they get a bit of a spotlight, or are they just sort of background blended?
Yeah, so focusing on Zach and Logan a lot, but there's quite a large group that end up on the island. Their personal favorites are Rob and Amelise, who are born and raised as monster hunters, so without any monsters, but their family hasn't had any monsters to fight in hundreds of years, supposedly. So there's a lot of questions in the first quarter of the book about whether these two are just from a kind of crazy family or whether they actually know what they're doing on the island. So they had a lot of fun playing with that, and then how they interact when the monsters finally show up, and they're like, "We told you so. We were we were right. There's monsters on this island, and we know how to handle them," kind of thing. Then there's Cordelia, who's the captain of the ship, and she is sort of in charge of a crew of people who had been down on their luck. Some are ex-soldiers that have lost a hand or a finger or can't fight anymore. Others are just people she's picked up, and she basically her motivation is to get rich, but get rich with all her crew in one piece is the hope. And finally, there's Logan's brother, who is the elder brother, who is a bit of a legend, and he is the one who is behind the journey in the first place. And Logan sort of sneaks along to join him and gain his sort of time in the sun, but things go very wrong before they even reach the island, and they're separated. So Logan's older brother is a little bit of Dustin is a little bit of a mystery because you don't see much of him until the last quarter of the book.
Very intriguing. So, what are your characters afraid of?
Well, Zachary is afraid of living. It's part of the reason why he's always sort of edged towards the dark, because he doesn't fear death, but he fears living and losing others in his life. And Logan is afraid of just about everything, but most of all, letting down others. So he's very much steps up to the plate when he needs to.
Okay, so do you have a favorite character? And no is an acceptable answer.
I'd say Annalise is probably my favorite character. She's one of the monster hunters, but her brother is the real monster hunter. He's the one that succeeded and is honored by the family and everything. But she's more of a had to do this, but is actually completely terrified of everything that's going on. And the only reason she's been able to make it this far is that her brother has been there to protect her. But she finds her own way on the island, so she really sort of stands up and becomes her own woman.
Okay. Which of your characters would you like to hang out with in real life?
Zachary seems like the kind of guy I'd like to get a beer with.
Okay.
Maybe not turning back to him too much, but
Okay, so you've written other fantasy books as well as this one. So would you like to talk about them for a few seconds, few minutes?
yeah, I mean, my most recent book, Defiant, is a little bit of a sci-fi science fantasy book, and it's actually got a new book coming out in about a month as well that I'm desperately writing the last draft of. But yeah, you know how it is sometimes with these pre-orders that you set months and months and months in advance, and they sneak up on you. But it should be ready, I think, by the end of the month. And so it's a little story about. It's more of a shorter, more high-paced story about a world where aliens have taken over Telemartha, this human planet, and the humanity didn't really have much chance to fight back against their technology and their powers. But it's about the humans hundreds of years later that are sort of trying to work out how they can overthrow the alien overlords.
Okay, so you write fantasy, of course. Are there any other genres that you would like to dabble in future?
I guess it's sort of fantasy adjacent / well inside of it, but I would like to try a lit RPG next year. I've actually got one in mind that'll be more of a comedy, a satire almost of epic fantasy, because I'd quite like to try something more humorous and more light-hearted, I guess.
That's interesting. That's not a usual answer, but it's a interesting genre. I think the lit RPG.
Yeah, it seems to be a growing genre, something I'd like to dip my feet in, and yeah, I'd love to write something quite different from. Feeling like I need a bit of a refresh after these last two books, and something fresh and different from my usual stuff. So something that makes people laugh would hopefully be fun.
Yeah, well, one of our viewers says she wishes she could write funny, but she's no good at it. But yeah, and I'm a bit like that too. Although I do occasionally put in a little bit of the darker humor.
Yeah, I'll see how good I am at it. I do have quite a dark sense of humor, so it may be a little bit dark sense of humor. But
yeah, I definitely, when I put humor in my books, it definitely tends towards the black humor and the and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everybody where they can find you and your books.
Cheers. All right. Well, all my books are on Amazon. They're free with Kindle Unlimited. You just have to look up Aaron Hodges, and Untamed Isles should pop up, or put in both, and you'll definitely find it. Or you can find me on aaronhodgesauthor.com or Aaron Hodges Author on Facebook or Instagram if you'd like to give me a contact or anything like that.
Okay, and I have his Amazon page linked in the description if you want to check out his books. And I'd like to thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure to you too.
And please join us next weekend when we have, I believe we have Josh Pantalleresco next weekend talking about his new book. I hope I got that right, but we have an author anyway. So thank you for being here. And that's it for now. So bye.